What's up everyone, it's Joe from Gadgetry Tech, and today we are going to talk about the FiiO FT1, a $150 closeback headphone from FiiO. And there is a lot to talk about with this one, and I'm not going to do my normal format as much. Normally I spend more time talking about build quality and comfort, which I will, but I have a ton of closeback headphones I want to compare this to, as well as the other headphones from FiiO, so you can kind of see where this stacks up. I've been scraping a lot of comments and questions I've seen on YouTube, forums, including HeadFi, to kind of gather what people are looking for. So I wanted to make this video sooner than later to help address some of those concerns and hopefully answer your questions. I do want to thank FiiO for sending this to me for review. Doesn't affect what I say about it. I don't believe in affiliate links of any special kind, so I'm just going to do generic links in the description to help you find it if you want to purchase it. I'm not financially motivated to say anything whatsoever, and there was no exchange back and forth with FiiO. So with that being said, let's talk about the basics and why you would consider this. Well, it's a closeback, and usually passive closebacks are not necessarily what you want to go for unless you need the benefits of closeback, whether it's because you want a very strong bass lift or you typically want it for the noise isolation. So depending on your environment or where you're planning on using these, the noise isolation works two ways. It helps reduce the ambient noise in the room. So if you have a noisier environment, this allows you to listen to music at a lower volume because you're not trying to compete with external sounds or environmental noises. And at the same time, if you're in a quiet environment like an office or a bedroom and you have someone else near you that you don't want to disturb, then you want to go with a closeback. And unfortunately, the closeback market is much more difficult to get right from a better sound quality perspective, at least from tonality and tuning, than it is with an open back or with IEMs, which are taking the market by storm. And I'm not using this to knock IEMs. I like the comfort of over-ears better than IEMs. I like how they feel and being able to just put them on and off my head. But admittedly, I haven't found tons of closebacks that I'm super crazy about just because I like how good some open backs sound. So what makes this exciting is they crushed it in the sound quality department. I'm going to get into that later, but I do want to open with that because that's a huge thing here. I think they really did a great job. It's not perfect, but before we get into all the sound discussion, I want to talk about build quality, fit, and finish. This is real American walnut on a $150 headphone. It feels great. It's a satin feel, kind of like matte. It's not glossy, which I like. It doesn't really show fingerprints. And then because, again, it's $150, this cup here on the outside is plastic. Then you have a metal fork. Now, this metal fork rotates a little bit. Interestingly enough, when I first got this, it would catch right here, and it still does, but it would be a much stronger catch when I first started using it. So I started doing it like this to kind of see if it would loosen up. After about 12 to 15 hours of use, this catch already isn't as bad. So I don't know if it'll get any better than this, but if you are concerned with the way things feel in your hand, no rattles, but you just feel like a little detent in the center point. It is nice that they give you rotation, obviously not full rotation, so you can't, if you're putting this on your head or around your neck, it's not gonna rotate and sit flat. So just to cover that. Clamp force and weight, it's an extremely light headphone, and it has a moderate to light clamp force, which is nice considering it's a closeback. Usually a closeback that has a stronger clamp is better for noise isolation, but not as well for comfort, especially if you wear glasses. Now I use gunner glasses myself because sometimes I like the blue light blocking glasses, and I have several frames. I actually intentionally purchase different frame thicknesses so when I test headphones and headsets, I can see how different frames interact with pad design, dimensions, etc. And this is good for glasses. It's actually on the better side for glasses comfort from a lot of other headphones I've used. The reigning champ right now for me for the best glasses comfort I've ever experienced is the Sivga Luon. The pads are like giant pillows, and frankly, the glasses just disappear. And on the gaming side of things, the Turtle Beach Atlas Air is still the champ there. This is still excellent though, and then you have this breathable sport fabric material here, which helps reduce temperature buildup. You lose sound isolation to an extent. They still say it attenuates by about 26 decibels. I found it to not be quite as much as that, at least for how it fits my head, but it does reduce it a bit, and more so than some other closebacks I have, just not as well as something like the Sennheiser 620S, which has the best passive noise isolation I've heard for a headphone under $500. I think that one does a great job. As far as the pad dimensions go, it's a pretty traditional opening and it's rather large. You have about 42 to 43 millimeters of width there. And then on the height side, it's going to be a little bit tricky to show this on the camera, so bear with me. But you have just about 55 millimeters, 56 millimeters of height at the peak. And as far as the depth goes, this is deep. Like you can see there's a lip on this ruler, so I'm already losing several millimeters and I'm still getting over 30 millimeters of depth. And on the front side, because there's a slight taper from the angled pads, this is showing, you know, when you factor in that gap, about 26, 27 millimeters. So it is deep. Now the baffle screen floats a few millimeters above the baffle, the hard stop where the speaker is. If you have larger ears, you may feel the fabric, but this is a pretty deep ear pad altogether, so you may not feel the baffle. You just might feel that little fabric touch your ear. This is a removable pad. It's not glued. There's nothing proprietary about that there, so you'll eventually find pad replacements. The good thing is with this sport fabric material, they don't deteriorate as much as like the synthetic leather does or the pleather. So if you're concerned about pad durability, that should be nice. Now, there's going to be some comments about the headband design because the FiiO FT3, FT5, and even the less expensive JT1, which I'll be talking about too, uses a suspension strap. And yes, those are all three have a more comfortable strap design. Now, the clamp force, weight, and pad combined with this particular strap is still very comfortable. You can see it has kind of like these little grooves or notches in the pad. This helps alleviate some pressure points, especially that top one. It doesn't create a hot spot. And the pad material is nice too. It's like this pseudo suede. It's like a suede material or velour. So I don't worry about like heat buildup as well. I found this comfortable. I tried this for a long gaming session, like 4 to 5 hours. I listened to a lot of music. I did some video editing. Then I switched over to games and I tried to keep them on as long as I could. And I never found these uncomfortable. So yes, while I found the JT1 and the FT3 more comfortable, I didn't mind this at all. I think it's in line with comfort from a lot of others, and I really think the lighter clamp force and lower weight helps a lot. Now I have this size to my head, and I am pleased to say they have a headband design that finally gets small enough. A lot of headphones lately, it seems like even on the smallest setting, it's still just barely small enough to fit my head. They're almost like they're too big. On the smallest setting, it is too small for me. It's resting right on my earlobe, so I have to pull this down. Now they advertise a ball bearing slider here. There's a little bit of a notchiness. You probably won't hear it. Actually, you can a little bit. But it is very, very smooth, and the resistance is just right. One of the feedback I had on the prior video, the Fostex TH808, is the telescoping yoke mechanism was almost too loose, and it ended up sizing larger as I used it over time. This has held its position just right. I really think they have their ergonomics dialed in well. If I had a nitpick, this clicky thing, I'm not a huge fan of, and I wish it would do full rotation, which I know isn't as good from a durability standpoint, but if you ever wore it around your neck, that's something to consider. Now, it's important to consider the value here, and sound quality is a huge part, as is comfort, as is build quality, but they didn't stop there with this, because at $150, you get a really nice cable. This is a decent length. You know, it's about, I guess, like 5 feet long. If I'm way off, I'll put the dimensions on the screen. But you have a balanced cable included. You have an 3.5 millimeter terminated with a 1/4 inch adapter included, single-ended cable. So depending on what amplifier you have, you can use either cable, and I like that that's included. Also comes with a really nice case. I love this case design. It's very similar to the Focal cases where it has this like sport fabric material. It's kind of like a hard case, and it's lightweight. Does a great job of keeping the headphones safe, but you can see there's no storage pocket for the actual wire. You just basically put the headphone in and then just carefully coil up the cable. So it's not perfect, but I think the value and these are oxygen-free copper cables too. It's like high quality, high strand copper cables. So the overall packaging and what you get out of the box from initial feel is actually quite nice, especially at the $150 range. Now I do want to cover amp sources. This does not require a powerful amp. They are 32 ohm impedance drivers, and they have a very high sensitivity. So being a closed back with high sensitivity, low impedance means you can pretty much connect it to anything and power it with more than enough volume to spare. You can hook this up to a phone with a little, $10 dongle, or a more powerful amplifier, or something really extreme if you want the features. So I will be covering the FiiO K11 R2R DAC in red because I think it's gorgeous in red. This is the K11, and I pointed it out in this review. The K11, the default filter is a little bit bright and harsh, and I don't think it complements the FT1 as well. So I recommend switching to filter 3 or like filter 6 to kind of soften it up a bit. Just give that one a shot. And I think it'll be a better pairing. I think the FiiO K11 or FiiO K11 R2R will have a slightly smoother presentation, but I can only guess until that comes in because that's not using a traditional DAC. It's using an R2R stack or resistor or ladder stack. So I'll cover that in a review later, but that might be a better pairing. Then you have something like the FiiO K11, or the K19, which has a nice little headphone mount you can put on top. This is completely overkill. You're not going to buy a $1,200 amp DAC for a $150 headphone, but this gives you a lot of other features on the gaming side. I'll have a cool video on that later. I actually really like this also with the I used it on the FiiO KB3 keyboard that I reviewed in the past. I actually still use that keyboard quite often just because of the DAC. And one of my favorite stacks with this one was the topping A70 D70 stack. And I got that one from Apos Audio, and that performed really well, especially on the bass quality of this. So speaking of bass quality, let's talk about how this measures. Now, I use a Gross style KB006X Pinaclone with an IC711 coupler, and then I upload it to a website called Squiglink. You can use that site to compare measurements against other headsets and headphones that I've covered, but keep in mind if they don't have the exact same pinna, it's like a different ear shape. It's almost like a fingerprint for how you hear sound. If you're comparing this to someone else's measurements of a different product, just keep in mind the measurements aren't apples to apples, and you will also hear it slightly different on your ear. With that being said, look how well this thing measures. This is a passive $150 closed-back headphone with real walnut and lots of cables and a carrying case, and it's comfortable, and it still measures this well. So this is kind of alluding to where we're going here. This is going to be a home run as long as it hits the mark for what people are looking for. So this uses a paper wood fiber driver. It's kind of like the more traditional paper fiber cones that we're used to. You know, the older person inside is really excited about the material choice because frankly I grew up listening to a lot of drivers that had paper cones, and I love the sound of them. They're still, you know, great, and it really comes down to one cone material doesn't guarantee something's going to sound a certain way. You want it to be, you know, fast and lightweight, but you also want it to be rigid. And I'm just excited that they embrace this. They did a lot of work inside the ear cup as well for tuning, as far as like port tuning and stuff. But when you look at the measurements, you do have amplified or enhanced lower bass or emphasized lower bass, and it carries into the upper bass and low mids a bit. You can see this, you know, between 100 and 300 hertz, it carefully tapers down. But the mid-range isn't super recessed. Everything keeps up with that bass mix. And if anything, this kind of bucks the trend what some other headphones typically do, where you look at the 1.5 kilohertz region, and usually headphones have a scoop there nowadays because they're trying to create a pseudo sense of stage. It's a psychoacoustic effect, and that's why you see that more and more. This one didn't really do that, and it's followed by a little bit more amplitude, about 1800 hertz, at least on my measuring rig. And then in the pinna region, the 4K region, it's recessed, which it's not recessed too much, and I think this produces an easier listen in that range because this is an area where some people are more sensitive than others, so it's usually safer to pull that area down a little bit. It just makes it more versatile for different listeners. Now, I do want to say this is how this rig measures it. It's not how you may hear it directly, it's not how I may hear it. And I do hear a couple things that not necessarily conflict with this, but this kind of shows a more subtle 8,000 hertz peak, for example. But in my ear, that peak was just a little bit stronger. And that was the only real criticism I had with the sound is on the EQ side, I took away some of the shout. And I'm going to talk about this from a subjective standpoint, but I did 1800 hertz minus 2 decibels with a Q factor of 1. And then 8,000 hertz minus 2 decibels with a Q factor of 4. If you do those two minor changes, that to me just took the edge off. It's not going to sound as energetic or resolving because you're reducing upper mids and treble, but it was a minor thing. A couple decibels isn't a big deal, and to me it just cut that occasional harder S or sibilant sound that I would get depending on the track. Aside from that, though, the tuning is fantastic. And for those of you concerned about driver matching, here are the left and right compared. They are very, very close to each other, in most cases within a decibel, and that's very well within the norm. Usually you'll see as much as 2 to 3 decibels from left and right, depending on the frequency and the headphones. So my particular unit had excellent matching as well. Okay, so I want to really quickly summarize the sound quality from a subjective standpoint first, because I'm going to pull out all the closebacks. We're going to just go down the list. I'm going to compare it to those, and that'll help kind of further explain, you know, where I'm coming through or from with this. This is definitely Harman-ish tuned. It follows the Harman curve to an extent, but there's definitely more bass emphasis, and there is a little bit more mid-range bite to it. That emphasis in like the 2 to 3K region is noticeable with certain tracks, and I think that helps kind of keep up with the bass. That bass also isn't too strong in the 200 to 300 hertz area, so it doesn't sound muddy or thick or congested either. And I talked about the psychoacoustic effect for soundstage and how a lot of headphone companies will scoop that 1.5K area. They didn't do that with this one, but it still sounds fairly wide. It still sounds very dynamic and detailed and engaging, and part of that is from the enhanced upper treble. It's not too strong. It's not metallic sounding. It's still relatively smooth. The only thing I found is that 8K region can have just a little bit extra sharpness to it, or that hard S, if you will. So taking that edge off, overall I found it pretty enjoyable, and I think the biggest standout with this, it's not so much about amplitude in this case when you're looking at it from a frequency response measurement. The quality of the bass to me is really what sets this apart from a lot of other headphones in quite a wide price range. So I'll get into how this stacks up to those, but it's not so much that it's just strong. You can hear the texture of the bass really well. It sounds very fluent. It sounds lush and inviting and enveloping and all these fun, I guess, audio buzzwords. I don't like to go down that path too much, but you can tell when you hear a headphone that has a lot of bass, it can still sound sterile or lacks a lot of like dynamics to it. And then you have ones like these where they just get so much more immersive and visceral feeling. It just sounds like there's way more texture to the bass. And that accompanied with a highly resolving driver that doesn't have any other glaring issues, I really think the tuning is going to work for a lot of people. This is going to be a little bit of a casual format, guys and girls, as if we're hanging out today. Normally I would just lay out all the headphones I'm comparing, but I'm going to have so many come out that it'll look like a cluster out here. So let's start with the FiiO JT1, a $70 headphone that under $100 just kind of broke the market, and a lot of people really liked this. It's not tuned perfectly. There's an insane amount of bass extension and hit in a more narrow frequency range than the FT1. So Tin Pan Alley from Stevie Ray Vaughan, the bass guitar sounds stronger on the JT1. So if you want like really, really strong bass guitar presence, the JT1 gave a little bit more to that. However, because it rolled off lower and above that area, there are certain parts where the FT1 still sounded more full-bodied, if you will. There is an amazing amount of sound quality that comes out of this for $70. So if you already have this and you're expecting a drastic change, this is tuned better. It's more for the looks and comfort, in my opinion, because the pads are more breathable. But the JT1 still has its merits. I think it has more of a wonky tuning in the mid-range because you have certain scoops in there, and then there are other parts that have more of a shouty characteristic on the JT1 that the FT1 does not. It's just a more refined sounding headphone, but this is good in its own way. I just think it's not as good without EQ. Without EQ, this is more versatile. Now you have the FT3, and this has a suspension strap, which I really like. It feels cheaper. It's definitely not as much of a closeback as this one. The passive noise isolation isn't as good either. When you look at the FT3 has a much higher quality construction. You have this metal ear cup here, which kind of looks like a wheel, in my opinion. I'm not saying like a Hot Wheel, but it's definitely a more sporty, aggressive look. The headband design is excellent, and as far as relieving pressure, it floats on your head. There's almost zero pressure on the headband design, so I could see why people were liking and looking for this. I think with this, they were going for a more compact look in case someone did travel with it, but as I said, that I could still wear for a long period of time. This is just kind of another level with comfort. Now, the issue with these and a closeback form is when you have this spring steel design from FiiO in particular, the clamp force is extremely light. These basically float on your head, and that means you will have bass reduction on the FT1. That's not so much an issue with an open back. You don't have to have as much of a seal to maintain bass, or at least alter the bass as much. If you break the seal, yes, you will lose some bass, but I don't think this headband design would have worked from a clamp force level for the FT1. So in terms of sound though, keep in mind this is an open back headphone, and of all the headphones I'm about to show you, it's arguably one of the best tuned ones here. It's 350 ohm, a little bit harder to drive. It also scales better with higher quality amps than some of these other headphones that don't quite need anything really to work. If you're listening to a lot of vocals and acoustic music, something that's better represented in the mid-range frequencies, the FT1 is going to do a better job. You're paying double the price to have a more natural presentation. It still has some warmth, but it doesn't have the slam and bass depth as this, partly because it's a closed back and it's also tuned to have more bass. So this just has a more neutral, everyday listen experience. The audiophiles that are chasing the highest quality sound for the money would gravitate towards this more, or something like a Sennheiser 6XO line, the 600 and the 650, just because it has a more natural tonality to it. It's great. There's no passive noise isolation, and it's double the price. So you would still consider the FT1 one if you're either chasing more bass or a little bit more energetic sound, because it's still very tastefully done. And then you have the passive noise isolation as well. So it really depends if you want to spend more money. Now the FT5, this is an interesting one. I want to use the term dark horse because a few reasons. One, the price is kind of expensive. Now I love these pads. These suede pads are very, very soft and comfy. I love wearing the FT5 even though it's much heavier because it's planar magnetic driver instead of dynamics. It has one of the worst tunings out of the box than all of the headphones I'm going to be talking about. It's not like it's terrible, but when you're looking at it from neutrality and not coloring the sound, it is all over the place. It's very upper mid bass forward. It's kind of thick sounding without a ton of bass extension. Like this is much deeper sounding, and you have a much darker upper mid range and treble with some sparkle and air up top. So there are some things that are going to sound magical on the FT5. It has this really weird way of kind of presenting a dark, wide, vast soundscape, if you will, where different audio cues kind of bounce all over the place. It really throws notes around very, very wide. So if you're trying to look for something that's kind of fun on the imaging side, this is great, but it strongly needs EQ in my opinion if you're trying to approach more neutrality. Now the FT5 takes EQ very, very well, better than most of the headphones here that I'll be talking about. So if you want something that scales well and you're looking at planars, out of the box under 500, not the best sounding headphone, but man, when you EQ it, it just comes to life. So that's something to play with. I think, believe it or not, at $150 even, the FT1 is tuned much better for everyday listening. You can listen to a huge variety of music, both rock, EDM, and rap, jazz, all of those. I typically prefer this. This could be a little bit more fun for gaming if you want a wider sound stage. But yeah, so I think that covers the FiiO lineup. And then just real quick, the FiiO FT3 and 5 come with this case. It's a gorgeous case, kind of like a nice leather. The zipper quality is a little bit better. It's smoother than the FT1 case, and you have a molded interior liner with a cable strap. So it's a higher quality case, but you're paying at least double the price. Now I'm going to briefly cover these just because there's a chance some people are going to ask, and I want to help answer as many questions as I can. The Hifiman HE-R9 retailed at a much higher price initially, down to just over $100 now. Sometimes it goes on sale for less than $100. Dynamic closeback, very large ear cups, and it uses the same headband found in the Hifiman Deva, the Edition XS. It's a big, funny looking headphone, very much bass forward, and followed by recessed mids, and even the upper mids and treble area can be kind of dark, and then there's some punch of sparkle and brilliance. It's not a highly resolving headphone. Even though there's a lot of bass, the bass texture and quality of the FT1 is significantly higher. So for apples to apples, the FT1, just to be blunt, it basically beats it in every single way. I haven't found any redeeming quality of the R9 that would make me consider it over the FT1. So if you're ever on the fence between those two, I can tell you with very high certainty, you'll be much happier with that. The Sundara closed needs EQ. frankly. Out of the box, the tuning is all over the place. It significantly colors the sound. There are some redeeming qualities, being that it's a planar, so if you're looking for planar sub-bass extension and you want to apply EQ, it can be fun. However, the amount of dampening and stuff that they did to turn this or make this a closed-back planar headphone, it does not sound as resolving or clear or articulate as the FT1. So even though I do like the headband design, I didn't mind it with the Sundara. There's no rotation of the cups. Frankly, I think that, again, the FT1 is kind of a clear winner here. It's comparable in price now. This might have higher power handling, but I never go loud enough to really know, because that'll damage your hearing. Then you have the Rode NTH 100. Now this is the 100, I think it's the M edition because it has the microphone. Basically the same thing, only they made the pad slightly thicker, which actually boosted bass a little bit. Even with that being said, this has a safe tune. If you just look at the measurements of this, it's actually tuned really, really well. It's not going to do anything crazy in any frequency area, so it's versatile. But the problem is the bass sounds kind of anemic, and you lack a lot of the resolution and clarity that the FT1 has. So if you're just looking for something safe and you want a darker, more relaxed sound profile, this has no sparkle, but it also isn't completely missing in any particular area. It's not so much coloring the sound, but to me it doesn't sound like it's at the same caliber of quality and detail retrieval that the FT1 has. So it's a clear win purely on the music side. The only redeeming quality of this is if you want something with a built-in mic at the same price. I think it's still decent enough for the gaming side, but purely on music, the FT1 has the edge. Now for a couple fun ones, we have the Sennheiser HD620S, which from a build quality perspective, even though it's more plastic, it feels extremely robust. There are some noises this makes though. I don't like that personally, but the ear pads are incredible. If you're chasing a closed back with excellent comfort and noise isolation, I think the 620S does a great job there. However, funny enough, this is effectively double the price of the FT1, and the FT1 to me sounds better than the 620S. I didn't mind the 620S. I was kind of happy that Sennheiser basically made a closed back version of the 560S with slightly different tuning approach, particularly because it's a closed back. This still has a really fun soundstage. If you're chasing a closed back with more stage, it does this at the sacrifice of some of the intimacy in the vocal region and guitars. So some of the mids take a little bit of a step back with this, and things sound a little bit thinner and more clinical, but also more airy and wide. The bass extension, even though there's one area where it's a little bit stronger on the 620S, when you A/B them and listen to them side by side, the FT1 always has a stronger presented bass, partly because the bass extension is so wide. It sounds much more full and textured. Believe it or not. So I actually like the bass quality of this more. It's not even that it's just louder as well. Then you have the Sivga Robin. This is an older headphone now. I covered this a couple years ago. One advantage you can see is these gorgeous marshmallow ear pads. If you're a glasses person and you just want a really comfy, affordable closed back and you're willing to do some EQ, the Robin is a fun headphone. It's a very different look. It's a more traditional, simple headphone design, but it's extremely lightweight. The cushions don't care if you wear glasses or not. The cable is one of my biggest criticisms of it. It has a lot of microphonics, so if you sit back and you move your head a lot, the cable picks up a lot of sound. This is a very strong V shape. There's a ton of bass down low. Bass quality and texture is actually quite nice, but followed by a big scoop in the mids, and then a lot of treble emphasis up top. So this is an unapologetic V sound. Nothing wrong with that necessarily if you're looking for that. So just keep that in mind, whereas I think the FT1 is going to be a little bit more versatile because the mids are filled in so much more. I almost forgot to bring this up, but I'll probably get asked about how this compares to the Beyerdynamic DT770 Pro X Limited Edition. It's a long mouthful of a headphone. It's also under $200. The build quality is really nice. It has more of the industrial feel to it. Big old detachable cable. It's a good headphone in certain ways, but I can tell you that even though that has like strong bass, the bass doesn't have the same texture, detail, or depth as this. This has a much higher quality delivery of bass than the 770. Now, the other thing about it is the tuning of that sounds a little bit darker and less resolving on the 770, followed by a very sharp peak that comes across kind of aggressively on the treble. So I wasn't a huge fan of that headphone when I did the review, but I did want to mention this in case you never saw it. It's one of those headphones that somehow doesn't sound as resolving or clear while still having a painful treble spike or two in a couple of areas. It's not unsalvageable. EQ goes a long way, but I think their gaming version of that, the 300 Pro that came out recently that I reviewed, because it used a different acoustic disc over the front of the driver, that tamed it a bit, and I think that one actually sounds a little bit better. So if you're open to a microphone, that's an option, but I still think overall this has the edge. All right, so this list just keeps going. Bear with me here. I'm gonna talk about a few others. This is the Harmonic Dyne Athena. I had some fun with this headphone, especially on the gaming side, because I found it really comfortable. The pads were excellent. And frankly, in the sub $200 range, this has the best cable I have seen on a headphone, and it wasn't even close. It just looks super premium. As far as the feel goes, you have these glass cups, which is a fingerprint magnet, but it is still pretty comfortable. I like the breathable pads. There's almost zero noise isolation with this one. Aside from the open backs, this is the leakiest semi-open back, closed back headphone, depending on how you look at it. This I just wanted to include because of the price, but I can tell you there's not a lot I would really... This isn't a bad headphone. This is one of those things where had this been one of the fewer options in this price range, I think a lot of people would like it. My issue is it doesn't have the neutrality and stuff that I like from an open back, but it also doesn't have the noise isolation of a closed back or the bass depth and extension of a closed back. It's kind of a weird tuning headphone in general. It doesn't sound as clear or resolving. Frankly, I just feel like it's a lower quality driver than a lot of the headphones I talked about. I would still take this over either of the Hifiman headphones for sure. If you want something that's kind of it just reduces some of the volume that leaks out, so you don't want people to hear it as much, but you still want to hear your environment, I suppose it'd be good for that, and it's also very light and comfortable to wear. So it's fun for gaming, but purely on the music side, even as a closed back, I think this does a much better job. I can tell you, if you can't tell where this is going, the FT1 is such a good headphone at $150. I felt like the only way to properly explain this is to show you all different headphones in this range and how it stacks up, because it's shocking how much they kind of reset the bar. So here's where we start running into a ceiling. And I want to give an honorable mention so I don't forget. The AKG K371. It's $150. That has the best tuning under a few $100 because it's almost like right in line with Harman. They sound great. My issue with the K371 is the comfort. It has a cheaper build feel and these leather pads that do break down over time. I've seen some people showing chassis failures on that. So it's a great headphone, and if you take care of it, I think a lot of people will still like that one. I personally don't own one, but it's something to consider looking into if you're just chasing more of the Harman curve. Based off measurements, this is still going to give you more bass amplitude and a little bit more energy up top as well without going like full V where the mids sound gone. Just a different presentation. So I'll be reviewing this. This is the Focal Azurus, and it's an awesome headphone. This is $550, and I think the tuning of this is a little bit safer than the FT1. So to keep it short, I think this is a better headphone. The passive noise isolation is comparable. However, it's 3 times the price, or more. It's actually more. It's almost 4 times the price. So the bass quality is as good, or if not better. It's very comparable to the FT1 as far as like the texture of the bass. It sounds great. You hear a lot of nuances in the bass, but it's not as emphasized as the FT1. So if you want the idea of that kind of bass quality and texture and you don't want to deal with EQ, then I think the Azurus is going to provide a slightly more neutral presentation. It also doesn't have the same bite or sharpness in the vocal region as you approach like 2000 hertz, 3000 hertz. It's a little bit smoother to me, so I really didn't need to do EQ too much. The only difference with this guy is as you approach like 5 to 6000 hertz, it's more recessed here. So it sounds less energetic, it sounds more relaxed, good, better, almost like an everyday listen. But if some people are chasing more of that excitement and you want vocals or guitars to have a little bit more attack to it, then the FT1 is still actually going to do that. This is just a phenomenal headphone. I will say though that this grill is beautiful as it is. I had the same issue with the Batiste. This has full swivel. How awesome is that? My problem is if I look down, because if I grab my phone or whatever, these wonderful, beautiful little grills are a beard grabber. I don't know what it is with my facial hair in this particular headphone design, but every now and then, if you have a beard like mine, these vents just like to pull my hairs out. It sounds horrible, but I don't want to not say that. I think the comfort is great, isolation is great. This is a safe for everyday listen, but at the price point it is, it's still commendable with the FT1 pulled off. Then you have the ZMF Bokeh. I don't know how you want to pronounce it, but Zach, the owner of ZMF, was into photography a lot and film, so the bokeh kind of came from that. This is a wonderful headphone. It's actually tuned, just to be blunt, it's tuned worse than this. This has a really wonderful sound for rock music because it has kind of some thicker mid-bass to low mid-range bloat, which can sound a little boxy and heavy on some tracks, whereas this will sound a little bit cleaner and more resolving. The advantage to this headphone is it scales really well with amps. So if you're a gear chaser and you're buying an expensive tube amplifier or something like that, then this can provide you with a pretty rewarding experience. It's very customizable. You have a lot of different pad and tuning options. It's gorgeous. You have different finish options. So you're paying partly for the luxury of the build, not purely from a sound quality and technicality standpoint. I think the FT1 is 100% a better value in the sound department. This just does a couple things that are special. Now, because of that, it's not as versatile. So you kind of have to already, in my opinion, have one or two other headphones, and you're just chasing something that adds an intentional flavor of what you're looking for. I like this, and I like the atrium closed more for rock and metal. I think they're really nice for that, but for like EDM and hip hop or even some jazz music, I actually still lean towards the FT1. So I think that again shows how well they're going here. Now you have the Extreme to my right, which is the Dan Clark E3. It's $2,000 closeback. That is better from a technicality standpoint. It's very good adherence to the Harman curve, and there's just a tiny bit of overemphasis in the 3K region, but you can EQ it down. That's a superior headphone in most ways. I actually find the comfort better on the FT1 over the E3 just for how it fit my head. I had too much lower jaw pressure. This is a more traditional design. So you really do have to push the price range to at least $500 before you start approaching something that actually provides a real contender or competition to what the FT1's giving you at this price. A lot of these were sent to me for review, or some that I've purchased. Again, it doesn't affect what I say about it, but I think this really shows how good FiiO pulled this off. Like, this is an incredible headphone at $150. In the gaming department, for those who are curious about that, this sound profile isn't amazing for competitive gaming, but you can always EQ it. It's great from a comfort standpoint, and once I did EQ, even without it, honestly, it was still fine because it was so clear. This driver that they use is really well done. So I could still play competitively enough, and with EQ, I got to extend that further. And then on the immersive side of gaming, it's damn near perfect. It's comfortable, enough noise isolation to drown out my computer fans, but then I can still hear the family in the background if they're calling for me. So I think this is going to be a huge hit. I don't know what the long term is going to be like in terms of build quality. I don't know if this will ever snap. It looks like a one-piece buckle, but there are a couple screws underneath. So hard to say, but damn, when you factor in the looks, the comfort, the sound quality, you get a great carrying case for $150, 2 cables, easy to drive, universal 3.5 connectors. Even though they're recessed, you can swap cables out. It really is a home run, in my opinion. It's not going to be perfect. EQ can help, but I think, and I hope this video helped you decide if this is the right headphone for you or not. This was a super long review and video, and I really appreciate it if you made it to the end, and I hope that I made your decision a little bit easier. I think it's commendable that FiiO is giving you end-game level closeback sound, if that's a thing, at such a low price point. I don't believe in paying the audiophile tax to get audiophile sound, and this proves that it can be done. So huge kudos to FiiO. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I'd love to see you at the next video. Stay safe, and I'll see you next time. Bye.